I've reviewed thousands of hours of security footage in my life. Boring stuff, mostly. Delivery drivers, raccoons, the occasional teenager hopping fences. But what my new camera system recorded at midnight changed everything I thought I knew about the thin line between watching and witnessing. It started 3 nights ago. I was scrubbing through the previous day's recordings, fast-forwarding through the mundane parade of suburban nothing, when the timestamp hit 11:59:47 p.m. The image stuttered. Not a glitch, exactly, more like the camera had blinked. When the feed resumed at midnight sharp, my empty backyard wasn't empty anymore. 13 translucent figures stood in a perfect circle on my lawn. They swayed in unison, their forms rippling like heat mirages despite the October cold. The infrared setting painted them in ghostly whites and grays, but their eyes burned black as void. In the center of their circle, the grass smoldered in a pattern I'd never seen before, a perfect ring, 20 feet in diameter with geometric symbols scorched into the earth at precise intervals. I checked my window. My actual backyard lay dark and still. Autumn leaves scattered across unblemished grass. No circle, no figures, just the familiar silhouette of my shed and the neighbor's fence. But on my monitor, the gathering continued. The timestamp made my blood freeze. October 13th, 1887, 12:013 a.m. That's impossible, obviously. The camera was brand new, installed just this week. The date should have read October 13th, 2024. I clicked through the settings, checked the system time, rebooted everything twice. When I returned to the footage, the date remained 1887. The audio came next. My system records sound, though I usually keep it muted. Who needs to hear every car door and barking dog? But something made me unmute this particular segment. Static filled my headphones first, then underneath it, a low chant. The words ran backwards, syllables reversed and stretched, but the cadence was unmistakable. Latin. Ecclesiastical Latin, the kind you'd hear in old churches or exorcism movies. I don't speak Latin, backwards or otherwise, but I recognized one phrase that repeated every 30 seconds. Porta clauditur, porta aperitur. Even reversed, even distorted, those words crawled into my brain and nested there. The figures moved with purpose, not randomly. They passed objects between them, things that looked like iron rods or stakes, though the low resolution made it hard to be certain. One figure taller than the rest held what appeared to be a leather-bound book. Every time it gestured, the others responded in perfect synchronization, their movements as choreographed as any ritual I'd seen in documentary footage of ancient ceremonies. At exactly 12:13 p.m., they vanished. Not gradually, between one frame and the next, my backyard returned to normal. Empty. Dark. The timestamp jumped back to 2024, like nothing had happened. I've watched that 13-minute segment 47 times now. Each viewing reveals new details, the way the burned circle seems to pulse with its own light, how the figure's robes flutter in a wind that doesn't disturb the leaves, the shadow of something massive moving just outside the camera's field of view. But it's the audio that haunts me most. When I slow it down, clean it up, reverse the reversal, I hear more than chanting. I hear my grandmother's voice among them. The camera recorded this same scene the next night, and the next. Every midnight, 13 minutes of 1887 bleeding through into my backyard. That same gathering, that same ritual, that same impossible date. Tonight, I'm going to watch it happen live. I've set up a chair facing both my window and my monitor. When midnight comes, I need to know, is my camera recording the past, or is the past recording me?
3 days before I saw the impossible, I was just another paranoid homeowner drilling holes in my siding. The break-ins had started hitting our neighborhood in September. 3 houses in 2 weeks, always between 2 and 4 a.m., always through back entrances. The cops suggested better locks. I decided on cameras. The SecureWatch 4K system arrived Tuesday morning in a box that felt heavier than it should. Budget-friendly, wireless, night vision, motion detection. Everything a remote IT worker needs to monitor their castle while debugging code upstairs. The installation manual, though, that was odd. Between the standard warnings about electrical safety and Wi-Fi passwords, someone had inserted pages of different paper stock, slightly yellowed, with instructions that seemed unnecessarily specific. Position camera 1 at 47-degree angle facing north-northwest. Not approximately, exactly 47 degrees. Maintain minimum 3.7 meter distance from any reflective surface, windows, mirrors, standing water, when mounting cameras designated for post 11:47 p.m. operation. The timestamp specificity made me pause. Why 11:47? Why not midnight or 11:45 or just nighttime? The manual included a diagram of my property, not a generic example, my actual lot, complete with the shed placement and the oak tree in the southeast corner. Red X marks indicated optimal mounting positions with GPS coordinates listed to 6 decimal places. I'd never given this company my address beyond shipping info. I was wrestling with the latter, trying to hit exactly 47 degrees on camera 1 when the installation tech pulled up. The appointment was supposed to be sometime between noon and 4, but he arrived at precisely 1:13 p.m., parking his van at the exact spot marked in the manual's diagram. Marcus Chen, Secure Watch Technical Support, he said, though his coveralls had no company logo. He was young, maybe 25, with the kind of nervous energy you see in overnight IT staff. His eyes kept drifting to my backyard. "You've got an interesting property here." "I broke ins," I explained, assuming he meant the crime tape 3 houses down. "Figure it's time to get serious about security." He nodded, but pulled out a device I didn't recognize. Looked like a modified EMF reader crossed with an old radio receiver. "Mind if I take some baseline readings? For optimal camera placement?" The device crackled as he swept it across my yard. Near the back fence, it emitted a low whistle. Marcus frowned, made a note on his tablet, then smiled tightly. "Interesting electromagnetic signature. Probably old wiring, maybe some mineral deposits. We'll want to avoid mounting anything in that zone." That zone happened to be a perfect circle, about 20 feet in diameter, right where I'd planned to put camera 3.
We worked in relative silence after that. Marcus suggested each camera with obsessive precision, using tools I'd never seen in any installation kit. A brass compass that looked antique, a level filled with dark liquid instead of the usual green, something that might have been a tuning fork but rang at a frequency that made my teeth ache. "The manual mentions reflective surfaces," I said as we positioned camera 2. "What's that about?" His hand stilled on the mounting bracket. "Interference patterns. After 11:47 p.m., the electromagnetic conditions change. Reflections can cause feedback loops in the image processing." He paused, choosing words carefully. "You'll want to follow those timing restrictions exactly. The system has built-in protocols for optimal performance." When we finished, he handed me his business card. Standard, except for the symbols along the bottom edge. Not quite letters, not quite pictographs. They seemed to shift if I didn't look directly at them. "Everything's calibrated," Marcus said, already backing toward his van. "The system will run a self-diagnostic at midnight for the first few nights. Don't be alarmed if you see some calibration patterns. And remember, no reflective surfaces after 11:47. "Exactly." He glanced once more at my backyard, at that spot where his device had whistled. "You've got good coverage now. Whatever happens, you'll see it." I thought he meant burglars. I thought the strange manual was just corporate liability paranoia. I thought the symbols on his card were a trendy design choice. 3 days later, reviewing that midnight footage, I understood Marcus hadn't been installing security cameras at all. He'd been setting up observation equipment. The question was, observation for whom?
The manual sat on my kitchen table between my coffee mug and my laptop, looking like any other piece of tech documentation. But as I flipped past the warranty information that morning, searching for troubleshooting steps, the pages separated at a section I'd somehow missed. Different paper, older, with a faint smell of iron and ash. The ink was brown, handwritten in precise block letters. Addendum 7-A, Observation Protocol 7. My first thought was that someone at the factory was playing an elaborate prank, but the details were too specific, too methodical. The protocol began with a warning in bold. Failure to implement these measures may result in dimensional overlap, temporal displacement, or worse. The instructions read like a mixture of IT documentation and occult ritual. 1. Within 72 hours of installation, mark each camera position with an unbroken circle of pure sodium chloride. Table salt acceptable if blessed or intentionally placed. Diameter must be 3.33 feet exactly. Never observe live footage between 11:47 p.m. and 12:13 a.m. local time. Recording will continue, but direct observation during active hours creates a two-way channel. If Protocol 7 activates, you'll receive automated instructions. Do not attempt to disable or disconnect the system during an active event. There were diagrams showing salt placement patterns, mathematical formulas I didn't recognize, and repeated warnings about maintaining the observer-observed boundary. The final line chilled me. Remember, they cannot see what does not see them. I should have thrown it out, called the company, demanded a refund. Instead, I found myself in my garage at 10 p.m. measuring out circles of Morton's iodized salt around each camera mount. The night was still, suburban quiet, but as I worked, I felt watched. Not by my own cameras, but by something else. Something that made the space between my shoulder blades itch. At 11:46 p.m., I sat at my desk with the security app open on my laptop. 1 minute until the restricted window. My rational mind insisted this was absurd. My hands shook as I watched the timestamp tick closer. 11:47.00 p.m. I meant to close the app. I meant to follow the protocol. But curiosity, that human failing that's killed more than just cats, kept my eyes on the screen. For 30 seconds, nothing changed. My backyard looked exactly as it should. Dark, empty, normal. Then the image rippled. Not pixelated or distorted, rippled, like water disturbed by a thrown stone. When it settled, my backyard was the same but different. The shadows fell wrong. The oak tree's branches moved in patterns that defied the still air. And in the spots where I'd placed salt circles, faint columns of light rose like pillars, invisible through my actual window but clear as day on the monitor. I looked between window and screen, reality and recording, trying to reconcile the two views. That's when I noticed the figure standing just outside camera 3's field of view, a tall shadow that shouldn't exist, moving with deliberate purpose toward the center of my yard, toward that spot where Marcus's device had whistled. My laptop chimed. New email. From no reply at securewatch-protocols.net. Subject: Protocol 7 activated. Await further instructions. Time: 11:51:33 p.m. It said, "Dimensional observation confirmed at your location. You have been selected as a point monitor. Do not interfere. Do not look away. Do not break the salt circles. Your first assignment begins in 8 minutes, 27 seconds. The watchers thank you for your service." My cursor hovered over the delete button, but the email vanished on its own, replaced by a download prompt, Protocol 7, Training Manual, Phase 1. The file size showed as 0.00 kilobytes, then 1.34 gigabytes, then symbols that weren't numbers at all. On my monitor, more figures had joined the first. They moved in the same ritualistic pattern I'd seen in the midnight recordings, but now I understood this wasn't a recording of the past. This was happening now. In a layer of reality my eyes couldn't perceive, but my cameras could. The salt circles weren't protecting the cameras, they were protecting me, keeping the two realities from fully merging. At exactly 12:13 a.m.,
The image snapped back to normal. My backyard was empty again, both on screen and through glass. But the salt circles glowed faintly in the infrared spectrum, and my inbox contained 7 new messages, all with the same timestamp, all with attachments labeled in languages I didn't recognize. I'd installed a security system to watch for burglars. Instead, I'd become part of something else's security system. The question was I protecting my world from them or helping them observe mine? The training manual finished downloading. Page 1 began. Congratulations on your selection as a dimensional boundary monitor. Your vigilance maintains the veil. Your observations prevent incursion. Remember, watch, record, but never intervene. The protocols exist for your protection and ours. I poured another salt circle around my desk chair and kept reading.
Marcus Chin's journal lay wedged between my porch railing and a planter, its leather cover rain-spotted but intact. He must have dropped it during installation. I'd meant to call the company, return it properly, but when I opened it to find contact information, I found something else entirely. The first pages looked professional enough. Installation notes, customer addresses, equipment serial numbers, standard field tech documentation. But after entry number 47, the tone shifted. The handwriting grew urgent, cramped. Diagrams replaced addresses. The same symbols from his business card appeared in margins, growing more elaborate with each page. October 9, 2024, property assessment number 1337, address, Maple Street, dimensional thickness, 0.23 millimeters, critical, salt requirement, 7.3 kilograms per camera point. Notes, homeowner unaware, standard protocol 7 implementation, intersection point confirmed, northwest corner shows 1887 bleed-through pattern, installed monitoring array as per watcher's directive. May God forgive me for not warning them. A hand-drawn map fell out as I turned pages. My neighborhood, but wrong. Streets I recognized were marked with colored pins, red, yellow, green. My house sat dead center in a cluster of red pins, each labeled with dates stretching back decades. The oldest, November 1952, first documented incursion, family of 4, displaced, cover story, gas leak explosion. The journal entries grew more detailed as I read. The company knows, of course. SecureWatch isn't selling security, they're maintaining a containment grid. Every budget system we install at these properties is actually worth $30,000 in specialized equipment. The homeowners become unwitting guards, watching the boundaries without understanding what they're seeing. There are 47 properties in this township alone where reality wears thin. They cluster around intersection points, places where dimensional membranes touch. The indigenous peoples knew. They marked these spots, avoided them. We built suburbs on top of their warnings.
Tucked between pages, I found a photocopied interview transcript dated 6 months ago. Interviewer: Mr. Chen, you've installed systems at over 1,300 properties. How many would you classify as thin? M. Chen: at least 400, maybe more. The company doesn't tell us everything, just enough to do the job safely, but I've been mapping them myself. There's a pattern. Interviewer: what kind of pattern? M. Chen: they align with ley lines, sure, but it's more than that. Each intersection point has a corresponding year, a temporal anchor. My current installation, the house on redacted, it's anchored to 1887. Every night at midnight, that year tries to reassert itself. Interviewer: tries to? M. Chen: the cameras don't just record, they observe. Observation collapses possibility. By watching, we keep the past from fully manifesting, but it requires constant vigilance. Miss one night, and the bleed-through intensifies. Miss a week. Interviewer: what happens if you miss a week? M. Chen: I've seen the photos from the 1952 incident. What came through didn't just displace that family, it retroactively erased them. Their neighbors couldn't remember their names, their photos faded, only the company records prove they existed at all.
The journal's middle section contained sketches, architectural diagrams of houses that looked like mine, but weren't. Floor plans showed rooms that didn't exist, doorways that opened onto voids marked non-Euclidean space, do not enter. One sketch showed my backyard from above, the burn circle clearly marked with annotations, primary manifestation point. Entities use this for transit. Salt disrupts but doesn't prevent. Requires active observation to maintain seal. Near the end, Marcus's notes became almost frantic. October 11th, 2024. Can't keep doing this. Every installation adds another family to the watch list. They don't know their guards. Don't know what happens if they fail. The company says it's necessary, that someone has to watch the weak points. But why does it have to be innocent people? The watchers grow impatient. More intersection points activate each year, the barriers weaken. We're running out of watchers and running out of time. The next convergence. The entry cut off mid-sentence. The remaining pages were blank, except for one line on the final page. If you're reading this, you're already part of the system. Watch. Record. Never intervene. The alternatives are worse. I closed the journal and looked at my laptop, where 7 unread Protocol 7 emails waited. Outside, my cameras maintained their vigil, red recording lights blinking in perfect synchronization. Marcus hadn't forgotten his journal. He'd left it for me to find. Another piece of documentation in a system built on hidden knowledge and unwitting participation. I added the journal to my growing collection of evidence and checked the time, 11:43 p.m. 4 minutes until the next observation window. 4 minutes to decide if I'd keep watching or become another entry in someone else's field notes about dimensional displacement and families that ceased to exist. The cameras never blink. Neither do I anymore.
The doorbell rang at 11:30 p.m., sharp and sudden. Through the peephole, Mrs. Chen stood on my porch in a quilted housecoat and slippers, looking like any retiree making an odd hours complaint about loud music or barking dogs. But her eyes darted constantly to my security camera, and her hands clutched something laminated against her chest. "I saw your computer screen through your window," she said the moment I opened the door. "The timestamp, the figures, you've been watching them." I started to deny it, to make excuses about privacy and closed curtains, but she pushed past me into my foyer. This woman who'd brought me banana bread when I moved in, who complained about the mail carrier schedule, who grew prize-winning roses. She moved through my house like a soldier securing a perimeter. "Close the blinds, all of them, now." Something in her voice made me comply. As I moved from window to window, she set her laminated sheet on my coffee table and rolled up her sleeves. The scars started at her wrists, twisted, branching marks like lightning strikes or tree roots, running up both forearms in patterns that hurt to follow. 1999, she said simply. I thought I could stop them. Thought if I disrupted their gathering, they'd find somewhere else. I was young, stupid, lucky to only lose the skin. Mrs. Chen, I don't understand. The Midnight Congregation has used this land for 300 years. Before your house, before mine, before the township itself. They're not ghosts. Not exactly. They're echoes that refuse to fade. Moments that keep happening because something here makes time soft. She unfolded the laminated sheet. The header read, Neighborhood Watch Special Division, Containment Protocol for Lot Number 1887-B. Below it, instructions typed on a typewriter, updated with handwritten notes in different inks across decades. Every house on this street has someone who knows. The Johnsons, the Battelle family, even that new couple with the Tesla. We take shifts, monitoring, making sure the congregation stays insubstantial. Your house, she paused, choosing words carefully. Your house is special. It sits on the primary convergence point. That's why they installed the cameras.
The protocol sheet detailed procedures I recognized from Marcus's journal, but with suburban-specific adaptations. Iron filings mixed into garden mulch along property lines, wind chimes tuned to specific frequencies, bird feeders positioned to create natural observation points that didn't count as direct watching. Rule 1, Mrs. Chen tapped the sheet, never acknowledge them directly. Don't speak to them, don't write about them in present tense, don't even think their names if you learn them. Acknowledgement is invitation. But I've already watched through a camera? That's filtered observation. Safe enough if you follow the other rules, but if you see them with naked eyes, if you call out, if you try to interfere, she held up her scarred arms. They reach through. Not physically, temporally. They burn backwards through your timeline, marking every moment you've existed. I was lucky. The previous owner of your house, Mr. Garrett, he tried to film them directly in '03. We found his camera. Never found him. His wife woke up one morning with no memory of being married. My laptop chimed from the kitchen. Another Protocol 7 email. Mrs. Chen glanced at the clock. 11:47 approaching. You need to understand, she said, standing. This isn't about protecting your property. It's about maintaining the barrier. The congregation performs their ritual every night, trying to complete something that was interrupted in 1887. We don't know what. We just know that if they succeed, the soft spot becomes a tear, and tears spread. She handed me a small bag from her pocket. Iron filings mixed with salt, and something that smelled like burnt herbs. Sprinkle this at your threshold before each observation window. It helps maintain clarity, keeps you from being drawn in. The Martins forgot once. Spent 3 hours standing in their backyard at midnight, copying the congregation's movements. Their daughter found them at dawn, speaking Latin backwards. Are they okay? They moved. Most do, eventually. But someone always has to watch. The house chooses its monitors. She paused at my door. That young man who installed your cameras, Marcus, he's my nephew, 3rd generation in the business. We keep it in the family when we can. Easier than explaining to outsiders. She left me with a protocol sheet and a phone number written on the back. For emergencies only. And remember, when you see them tonight, and you will see them, don't look for faces you recognize. The congregation recruits from every timeline it touches. Your grandmother knew that better than most. The door closed, 11:51 p.m. I sprinkled the iron mixture at my threshold and returned to my laptop where the security feeds waited. Mrs. Chen's porch light was on 2 houses down. In her window, I could see the faint glow of another monitor, another watcher maintaining the vigil. We were all guards here, whether we'd chosen it or not.
The photo album lay in a box marked Mom's Things, basement, that I'd been avoiding since the move. But Mrs. Chen's parting words about my grandmother echoed as midnight passed, and I found myself digging through decades of family history by laptop light, security feeds still cycling on my second monitor. There she was, Grandmother Elise, standing in front of my house in 1963, same porch, same oak tree, same angle where camera 3 now watched. But in her hands, she held something that made my blood chill. A leather journal identical to Marcus's, down to the strange symbols embossed on the cover. Behind the photos, wrapped in tissue paper that crumbled at my touch, I found her diary. The entries began normally enough. Grocery lists, gossip about neighbors, complaints about grandfather's smoking. Then, July 13th, 1964. The congregation accepted me tonight. After 2 years of watching, of maintaining the salt circles and iron barriers, they finally acknowledged my presence. I am no longer observer, I am keeper. The responsibility is heavier than Mother warned. My hands shook as I read further. The woman who'd taught me to bake cookies and told me bedtime stories had been part of the very phenomenon I now watch through digital screens. But her role was different, not preventing the gatherings, but facilitating them. August 9th, 1964. The barrier weakens each year. What the congregation does, what we do, is not invasion, but maintenance. We gather at the intersection points to reinforce the boundary, to keep the dimensions from collapsing into each other. Without us, without our ritual, both worlds would shatter like glass meeting glass. The entries grew more complex, mixing English with Latin phrases and those same shifting symbols. Diagrams showed the burned circle in my backyard, but labeled differently. Not as an intrusion point, but as a dimensional anchor. The congregation wasn't trying to break through, they were holding everything together. Then, September 1965, everything changed. I've broken the first law. I looked directly at him.
not through time, not across the veil, but truly saw him. Thomas. He stands in the same position each night, third from the left in the circle. He's been dead since 1887, the night the original ritual failed. But in the between space where we meet, death is just another state of being. He saw me looking. He smiled. The romance that followed read like tragedy predetermined. A living keeper and a dead guardian, meeting in the 13 minutes when dimensions touched. They couldn't speak. Sound doesn't carry properly between states. But they developed a language of gestures, of positions in the circle, of objects passed between worlds that existed in neither. December 3rd, 1965. Thomas showed me the truth tonight. The house isn't built on an intersection point. It is the intersection point. Every family who lives here becomes part of the mechanism, whether they know it or not. The contract passes through blood and deed, binding tighter with each generation. I thought I was protecting the boundary. I am the boundary. The final entry was dated January 15th, 1966. I'm pregnant. The child grows, but I feel it existing in both worlds simultaneously. Thomas touches my belly during the gatherings, and the baby responds to a father it will never meet in daylight. The others know. They've given me a choice. Step fully into the between space and join Thomas permanently, or break the circle and pass the obligation to my child. Either way, the house will claim its keeper. It always does.
I choose the living world. I choose my daughter. May she forgive me for the burden she'll inherit. May her children forgive her in turn. The watching never ends. The circle never breaks. The house remembers all who serve. I set down the diary and looked at my laptop screen. 12:07 a.m. On the monitor, the congregation swayed in their eternal ritual. Third from the left, a tall figure in period clothing stood exactly where the diary described. As I watched, he turned toward camera 3, toward me, and placed a translucent hand over his heart. Thomas, my grandmother's impossible love, my grandfather who never was. I understood now why the house had sat empty after my mother died, why the lawyers had been so insistent I take possession, why the security system had arrived before I'd even finished unpacking. The contract didn't pass through legal documents. It passed through blood, through watching, through the simple act of seeing what shouldn't be seen. On my desk, the Protocol 7 emails pulsed with new urgency. The subject lines had changed. Keeper Orientation Phase 1. Your hereditary obligations. The watching continues. I was home. I had always been home. The house had simply been waiting for its keeper to return. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing for 3 hours. Secure Watch alerts stacked like a digital scream. Motion detected. Backyard. Anomaly registered. Camera 3. Temporal variance exceeding acceptable parameters. Each notification carried timestamps that made no sense. Some from minutes ago, others from 1887, a few from dates that hadn't happened yet. On my laptop, the midnight gathering had swelled from 13 figures to 37. They no longer maintained their careful circle. Instead, they pressed against invisible boundaries, their forms flickering between translucent and solid like a TV struggling to hold a signal. Where their feet touched ground, the grass blackened in perfect footprint shapes that remained after they vanished. At 3 a.m., I ventured into the backyard with a flashlight. The burned circle from the footage was really there now, not fully, but visible as frost-white grass that crunched under my feet like glass. Iron filings lay scattered in intricate patterns, spirals within spirals, symbols that matched my grandmother's diary, protective geometry that something had desperately arranged from the other side. The doorbell rang at 3:17 a.m. No one stood on my porch, but a priority mail package sat on the mat, still warm as if fresh from a printer.
The shipping label showed only symbols where addresses should be, and the postmark read, Temporal Post, Urgent Delivery, Timeline Convergence Imminent. Inside, a leather-bound manual, thicker than any user guide had right to be. A small vial of viscous golden liquid labeled Boundary Oil, apply sparingly, and a digital timer already counting down from 71, 43, 27. The manual's cover bore a single word, breach. The first page explained in clinical terms what my cameras have been showing. Dimensional membrane deterioration accelerates when observation protocols fail. Your location shows 73% degradation. At 85%, physical manifestation becomes inevitable. At 90%, temporal collapse begins. At 100%, both timelines merge permanently. Current deterioration rate 0.4% per hour. My laptop erupted with new alerts. The security app's interface glitched, showing multiple timestamps simultaneously. In one feed, my backyard was empty. In another, the congregation filled every inch of grass. In a third, something massive and indistinct pressed against the camera lens from inside the between space. The manual detailed emergency procedures with the desperate precision of someone who'd watched other locations fail. 1. Apply boundary oil to all camera lenses immediately. This will stabilize visual feed and prevent two-way transmission. 2. Expand salt circles to 5.55 feet diameter. Previous specifications insufficient for convergence event. 3. Maintain constant observation. Blinking is acceptable, looking away is not. 4. Do not attempt physical intervention before 95% degradation. Earlier attempts accelerate collapse. 5. Prepare for Keeper Transition Protocol. See Appendix J.
I found Appendix J. The procedures it described weren't for preventing the breach, they were for surviving it. Diagrams showed how to position iron filings on your own body, how to anchor yourself temporally while reality shifted, how to speak the words that would bind you as permanent guardian when the previous keeper could no longer maintain the barrier. The timer read 68, 22, 41. Outside, car alarms began blaring up and down the street. Not from break-ins, from temporal pressure. The congregation's increased activity created ripples, making electronic systems hiccup across timelines. Mrs. Chen's porch light strobed between gas lamp and LED. The Johnson sprinkler system activated, spraying water that fell upward. My phone rang. Unknown number, but I recognized Marcus's panicked voice. The company's tracking 7 simultaneous deterioration events. Yours is the worst. The pattern, it's not random. Something's coordinating them, trying to create multiple breaches at once. What do I do? Follow the manual, use the oil, and whatever you do, don't. The line went dead. Not disconnected, erased. My phone showed no record of receiving a call. The security feeds flickered. In the space between frames, I saw my grandmother. Not a memory or recording, but her actual presence in the between space, standing where she'd stood in 1966. She held her hands up, pressing against the thinning boundary, her mouth forming words I couldn't hear. Behind her, Thomas and the other guardians had formed a new pattern. Not their usual ritual, but a desperate wall of bodies trying to hold something back. The timer read 65, 17, 33. I opened the vial of boundary oil. It smelled of ozone and old books, of church incense and electrical fires. The manual warned to apply it sparingly, but didn't explain why. As I touched the first drop to camera 1's lens, I understood. The oil didn't just stabilize the feed, it synchronized the observer with the observed. For a moment, I existed in both timelines, simultaneously, feeling the weight of every keeper who'd stood in my place. The congregation wasn't trying to break through anymore. They were trying to hold something back. And in 65 hours, they would fail.
The van pulled up at 4:47 p.m., exactly as the timer hit 48 minutes. Secure Watch logos decorated its sides, but the vehicle itself was wrong. Too heavy, riding too low, with windows tinted beyond legal limits. 3 people emerged wearing company coveralls, but their equipment cases bore locks I'd seen in my grandmother's sketches, and their eyes held the exhaustion of those who'd seen too many boundaries fail. Mr. Davidson? The team leader was a woman in her 50s, gray-streaked hair pulled back severely. Dr. Sarah Voss, Secure Watch Emergency Response. We need to assess your situation immediately. They didn't wait for permission. The youngest, barely out of college, began unpacking devices that looked like Marcus's EMF reader had bred with a radio telescope. The third member, a man with burn scars similar to Mrs. Chen's, started chalking symbols on my driveway in patterns that hurt to follow. Your degradation rate has accelerated, Dr. Voss said, studying a tablet that showed my house as a pulsing red dot. Show me your observation setup, now. I led them inside, where my laptop still displayed the multiplying feeds. Dr. Voss took one look and swore in a language that predated Latin. You're running civilian software on a Priority 7 intersection. No wonder the boundary's failing. She produced a metal briefcase and began extracting items. Cables that seemed to absorb light, a keyboard with extra keys bearing impossible symbols, and a small bronze medallion she clipped to my monitor. The security app's interface immediately transformed, revealing hidden menus labeled in multiple languages across multiple times. Secure Watch is just the current name, she explained, fingers flying across the keyboard. We've been the Watchers, the Guardians, the Order of Dimensional Stability. The technology changes, from standing stones to telescopes to digital cameras, but the mission remains. We monitor the weak points. We maintain the barriers. We prevent what happened in 1887 from happening again. What happened in 1887? The scarred man looked up from his chalkwork. Full convergence, 2 timelines occupying the same space. The original congregation tried to prevent it, created a stable loop instead. They're still trying to complete their ritual, to separate the timelines properly, every night for 137 years.
Dr. Voss unfolded a laminated map on my coffee table. My neighborhood was marked as one point of a 7-pointed star, with lines connecting to locations across the county. Each point showed a date and a percentage. Most read 15 to 20%. Mine showed 77% and climbing. The configuration is breaking down, she said. Your point is the anchor. If it fails, the others follow. Cascade effect. 7 breaches opening simultaneously. She pulled out a manila folder stamped with warnings in multiple languages. This is why we can't allow physical intervention. The autopsy report inside was dated 2003. The photos showed a body that existed in multiple states simultaneously. Young and old, fresh and decayed, whole and dispersed. The cause of death was listed simply as temporal displacement. The victim's name was redacted, but I recognized the address. Mr. Garrett, the previous owner Mrs. Chan had mentioned. He thought he could disrupt the gathering physically, walked into the circle with iron chains and salt, trying to banish them. Instead, he got caught between timelines. His body couldn't decide when to exist, so it tried to exist in all times at once. We found pieces of him scattered across 150 years. The young tech approached with a printed sheet. Vocal protocols are ready. These need to be spoken into camera 3 at specific intervals. The list contained phrases in phonetic spelling, some Latin, some older, some in languages that had never been spoken by human throats. Each had a timestamp down to the second. The cameras aren't just observing, they're anchor points. Your voice carrying these phrases reinforces the boundary. Think of it as patching code in reality's operating system. The scarred man finished his driveway artwork, a complex mandala that made my eyes water. That'll buy us maybe 12 hours of stability. After that, he shrugged, hope you're good at reading phonetics under pressure. Dr. Voss handed me a final item, a silver pin bearing the true symbol of their order, not the corporate logo, but something far older. You are not just a homeowner anymore. You're part of a containment network that spans centuries. The previous keeper, your grandmother, held this point for 30 years. Now it's your turn. The timer read 44, 33, 17. What happens at 0? I asked. Either you complete the keeper transition, or we lose this intersection point and 7 timelines collapse into 1. No pressure. They left me with the protocols, the timer, and the weight of two realities pressing against my camera's digital eyes. The timer hit 000 at 11:59:47 p.m., 13 seconds before midnight. In those 13 seconds, reality held its breath. My laptop showed feeds from all cameras simultaneously, a kaleidoscope of timelines bleeding together. The congregation no longer waited for midnight. They pressed against the boundary continuously now, their forms solid enough to cast shadows in both 1887 and 2024. Through my window, the backyard strobed between versions of itself. Pristine grass, burned circle, muddy field, paved stone, primordial forest. Dr. Voss's voice crackled through the emergency frequency. Evacuation protocol is now in effect. You have 3 minutes to reach minimum safe distance. But on camera 3, I saw my grandmother. Not a memory or an echo, her actual presence in the between space, arms spread wide, holding back something massive that writhed behind the congregation. Her strength was failing. After 30 years of holding the line from the other side, she couldn't maintain the barrier alone. I grabbed the protocol sheet, the vial of boundary oil, and the iron filings Mrs. Chen had given me. The back door's handle burned cold enough to blister, but I turned it anyway. The moment I stepped outside, time became negotiable. The air tasted of copper and ozone. Gravity pulled in directions that shouldn't exist. The congregation turned as one to face me. 37 figures from 1887, my grandmother from 1966, and something else, something vast and hungry pressing through from a time that never should have been. "Don't!" Dr. Voss screamed through my earpiece. "The temporal shear will..." I stepped into the circle. Reality shattered and reformed with each heartbeat. I was 5 years old, visiting Grandma. I was 35, installing cameras. I was unborn, was ancient, was every age at once. The congregation surrounded me, their faces clear now. Men and women who died trying to prevent the first convergence, trapped in an eternal loop of failed prevention. Thomas stood before me, my grandmother's beloved, dead for 137 years, but alive in this space between spaces. He pressed something into my hand, an iron key that existed in both timelines. His mouth formed words in the old language, the binding phrases I needed to speak. Behind him, the thing they held back revealed itself. Not a creature, but a wound in reality itself, a place where time had torn and never healed. Through it, I glimpsed infinite timelines trying to collapse into one point. Our point. This backyard that was ground zero for a catastrophe that kept almost happening. I raised the protocol sheet, but the words swam before my eyes. Past and present overlapped. I was reading my grandmother's diary, Marcus's journal, the containment manual, all simultaneously. The phrases I needed existed in all of them, scattered across time like breadcrumbs leading to this moment. "Camera systems holding," the young tech reported through static. "He's in frame on all feeds. Multiple timeline capture active." I began to speak. Not in English or Latin, but in the language of boundaries itself. Words that existed in the spaces between sounds. Each syllable cost years. I felt them leaving me, time itself becoming currency for the binding. The congregation joined their voices to mine. My grandmother stepped forward, taking my free hand, and I understood. The guardian role wasn't a prison, it was a partnership. Living and dead, present and past, all of us holding the line together. The thing beyond the veil fought back. Reality convulsed. My neighbors' houses flickered between existing and not. The street became a river, a void, a street again. But I kept speaking, the words flowing now from genetic memory, from the obligation written in my blood. "Porta clauditur," I said, the Latin finally clear. "The door closes." "Porta custoditur," the congregation responded. "The door is guarded. In aeternum," we finished together. Forever. The key in my hand grew hot. I pressed it into the earth at the circle's center, and reality snapped back like a rubber band. The congregation faded to translucent, then invisible, but I felt them still, would always feel them, my eternal partners in this watch. The wound in time scarred over, held closed by our combined will. I collapsed to my knees in grass that was only grass, in a backyard that existed in only one timeline.
but when I looked at my hands, they bore the same branching scars as Mrs. Chen's. The price of touching between space. The mark of a guardian. Breach contained, Dr. Voss's voice came through. Exhausted but relieved. Degradation reversing. All 7 points stable. I stood on shaking legs and walked back to my house. On my laptop, the security feeds showed normal darkness, except on camera 3, where a faint figure stood, my grandmother. Young again. Finally at peace. She nodded once and faded. The timer on my desk had reset. 8760:00:00. Hours in a year. Days until the next convergence. My watch had begun. My morning routine at 6 a.m. Coffee, email, check the overnight footage, apply boundary oil to camera 3, log the dimensional thickness, holding steady at 0.31 millimeters, and start my remote software development job. The Python code on my screen seems laughably simple compared to the reality code I maintain after dark. 1 month as a guardian has taught me the rhythm. The congregation appears nightly at midnight, translucent and calm, performing their eternal ritual without the desperate urgency of the convergence. They're my coworkers now, in a way, fellow employees in the universe's most essential job. Thomas nods to me through the lens each night. My grandmother doesn't appear anymore. Her watch has finally ended. The Secure Watch van arrives every Tuesday at 3 p.m. sharp. The driver never speaks, just drops off supplies. Boundary oil, specialized salt, iron filings pre-blessed by priests from 17 different faiths, and occasionally new protocol updates printed on that strange old paper. My latest delivery included noise-canceling headphones with a note for the screaming nights. Every guardian hears them eventually. This morning, I'm training Kevin from 2 houses down. He installed his cameras yesterday. Another Secure Watch special, another unwitting recruit. He thinks I'm just a helpful neighbor sharing home security tips. So the manual says something about not viewing between 11:47 and 12:13. He holds up the familiar pages, confusion clear on his face. Just follow it, I tell him, mixing truth with misdirection. The system does automatic calibration then. Watching can interfere with the process. I don't mention that his house sits on 0.3 of the 7-star configuration, or that his cameras will soon show him the Civil War soldiers who've been marching through his basement since 1863. Mrs. Chen brings cookies, playing her role as the neighborhood busybody while slipping Kevin a business card for electrical concerns. The symbols on it will make sense to him soon enough. We've gotten good at this dance, the gradual revelation, the careful induction of new guardians. My work laptop pings with a code review request. I minimize the security feeds and focus on debugging a shopping cart feature, pretending my biggest concern is SQL injection attacks rather than dimensional ones. The normalcy is performative, but necessary. The mortgage still needs paying. The world keeps spinning. The barrier holds because people like us maintain our cover, our sanity, our routines. At lunch, I walk my property line, checking the salt circles. The grass has grown back everywhere except that central circle. That will always remain burned, a scar across timelines. The mailman waves, oblivious to the symbols chalked on my driveway, or the way his shadow flickers when he crosses the intersection. Dr. Voss calls at 4 p.m. from my weekly check-in. Stability looks good. You're adapting well. Better than most first-generation guardians. First generation? But my grandmother inherited the house, not the blood. The obligation can pass through property or genetics, but rarely both. You're unique, Mr. Davidson. The convergence proved that.
I think about that as evening approaches, about inherited duty versus chosen responsibility, about the child I don't have, the family line that might end with me. Who will inherit this watch when I'm gone? Another buyer drawn by surprisingly affordable pricing? Another bloodline called home? At 11:55 p.m., I settle into my monitoring position. The feeds are clear, the protocol's ready. Kevin's cameras come online. I see his face pale as he witnesses his first impossible midnight. I send him a text. It's normal. Don't look away. Check your manual, Section 7. Midnight arrives with its familiar chill. The congregation manifests, translucent and orderly. They begin their ritual, the same movements for 137 years, holding the wound in reality closed through repetition and will. I speak the nightly phrases into camera 3, my voice joining the eternal call and response. Then I see it. In the final frame before they fade, a small figure among the congregation, a child, maybe 7 years old, wearing a striped shirt I recognize from my mother's photo albums. The child turns toward camera 3, and I'm looking at my own face from 30 years ago. The feed ends. The timestamp reads 12:13:00 a.m., but the image burns in my mind. Myself as a child, already part of the congregation, already bound to this duty before I was born. The cycle doesn't just continue, it exists outside linear time, a loop that creates itself. I close my laptop and make a note in the log. All normal. The watch continues. Tomorrow, Kevin will have questions. Next week, another house will install cameras. Next year, the timer will reach 0 again. But tonight, I just sit in my kitchen, guardian of a threshold I'm only beginning to understand, keeper of a secret that keeps itself. The red recording lights blink in perfect synchronization. Somewhere in time, a child, who is me, takes his place in the circle. The barrier holds.